Alright guys, so earlier this morning there was an absolutely wild situation unfolding in Baltimore at the Francis Scott Key Bridge, where it basically just completely collapsed in on itself as this ship that you can see here collided into one of the major pillars that was holding it up. So I'm going to show you a couple different angles of what this actually looked like. Then we're going to get into some interesting responses from conservatives primarily, who are theorizing about the cause of this crash and basically saying it has something to do with either migrants or wokeness or DEI or a whole bunch of other things, attacks against the United States. So we're going to get into all of that and some other things as well. So let's just go ahead and watch a couple different angles of this. So here you see it crashing into the bridge. The entirety of the bridge, essentially, in this middle portion just folds down, falls into the water. And in terms of some of the details of like casualties, as of right now, the latest reporting that I've seen is that there are 6 missing or at this point presumed dead construction workers who were on the bridge. So obviously horrific. I'm surprised that it's not more than that. I mean, here in this video, you can even see cars continuing to drive across the bridge. It looks like some of these are like semi-trucks. You can see on the ship itself, the lights are kind of going off and on as it gets closer and closer to this point where it crashes, which I think gives an indication that there was probably some power issue or something else happening with the ship that caused it to go off course like this. And then it, inevitably ends up hitting the pier and, obviously the bridge collapses in on itself. We can skip a little bit forward here. So, I mean, same thing roughly as the first video. So, some issue with the ship, obviously I don't know. I'm not an engineering specialist. I don't know why this bridge was so easy to take down. I mean, there could be issues with, the engineering of this. There could be issues with a lack of proper maintenance on the bridge. It could also just be the fact that this is a giant fucking ship crashing into one of its main support beams. I don't know. And I don't know what the issues specifically with the ship itself were, but clearly it was having some sort of technical issues there. So we had the Biden administration came out. He said he's going to have the federal government pay for the entire cost of reconstructing the bridge. So in the meantime, I mean, these kinds of repairs could potentially take months, years to actually, finalize, to be able to build a new bridge, to remove all of the debris and everything from the water. He's saying the federal government is going to entirely pay for it. Listen, I'm not against the federal government funding, infrastructure projects, to say the least. But it seems like there should be at least some investigation or some sort of questions that are raised with the company in terms of how this actually ended up happening. And so anyways, that's Biden's take on it. Now we get to this short report here from the Lever that I'll link down below if you want more information on it. But they point out here that the feds recently hit the cargo giant that owns the ship that crashed into the bridge. And they hit this company in Baltimore disaster for silencing whistleblowers. So you can go and read the article if you want for yourself. Essentially what they detail is how this company basically required their workers, whenever they saw some sort of glaring safety issue or potential hazard or whatever the case may be, to report directly to the company instead of reporting it to regulators or the National Guard or the Coast Guard or whatever. And so, there are some significant questions, again, that need to be asked of this company. Just 8 months ago, you were getting hit by the feds for, unsafe practices, essentially. And now this kind of thing happens. Now, I'm not saying they're responsible for it. Who knows what actually happened here? There's going to be an investigation, I'm sure, and we'll eventually find out. But I think that needs to be a part of the conversation, right? And so I line all of that up because, again, there are reasonable questions to ask about the infrastructure and the engineering and how did this ship have these errors on it? Was it, a lack of funding that this company was giving towards, safety or lack of staff on the ship? There are so many different fair questions and things that need to be answered in regards to this. But of course, instead of, going after the company potentially or pointing out the issues with a lack of infrastructure investment and, dumping our money into the military and police and all of these other bullshit things, instead of spending it on actually improving the country and even maintaining the country, instead of actually getting to the root of what may be the cause of this, we have conservatives who are blaming everything else that they can possibly come up with. So here we have Fox News's Maria Bartiromo. who is going to give you one of the most bizarre pivots that I've ever seen in my life. Let's watch this clip.
There is. Let me also get your take on what's going on in terms of world affairs. The White House has issued a statement on this saying that there's no indication of a nefarious intent in the collapse of the Francis Scott Key Bridge. The ship involved in the collapse of the bridge is 948 feet long, called the Dolly, a Singaporean flagged container. But of course, you've been talking a lot about the potential for wrongdoing or potential for foul play given the wide open border. That is why you have been so adamant. Why has the Republicans had such a hard time securing this border? The president says he's not going to take executive action. You know that.
So, like, what the fuck am I supposed to do with that? You just went from talking about how, the bridge collapsed, right? And then how their initial reporting is saying there's no evidence whatsoever that there's some sort of nefarious intent here, or this was an attack or whatever. And then you somehow transition that into this may have something to do with the open border under Biden. I mean, two things. Number one, the border is not open. Joe Biden is, if anything, too far right when it comes to border policy. Just look at the recent proposal that he was trying to get Republicans to get on board with before they all bailed on him as it was drafted by, Republican Senator James Lankford. They all threw him under the bus because Trump wants to run on the chaos at the border for the 2024 election. So they all bailed on that incredibly right-wing immigration bill. So number one, you're wrong on Joe Biden's immigration policy. He's incredibly draconian when it comes to that. But number two, what the fuck does the border have to do with this ship crashing into a bridge? I mean, somebody else made this point on Twitter, and I think that it's true. It's like, when you want to have a conversation with many conservatives about something like gun control, like reasonable, common sense, popular gun control safety measures, right? Conservatives will spin themselves in circles, throwing tantrums about there's no connection between gun violence and gun deaths and mass shootings and the guns themselves, right? It's a people problem. It's a mental health problem, even though we don't want to invest in mental health. It's a mental health problem. It's whatever. It's not the guns, right? So they'll separate those pretty easy to connect things in that circumstance. But then when it comes to something as basic as a ship crashing into a bridge, where you could ask some fair questions, somehow they're able to tie themselves into pretzel knots to try to spin this to be about migrants? What are we doing? How do you say the ship crashing into the bridge is because of the open borders, but you don't understand that connection when it comes to other things, right? Okay, anyways, we'll move on, because we have some other things to get to here, right? Some even more insane takes. So I'm going to play this video here for you guys. This is the mayor of Baltimore. And pretty standard clip that was posted. And after we watch this, I'm going to show you guys what the poster of this clip had to say about it, okay?
Everyone, this is a unthinkable tragedy. We have to first and foremost pray for all of those who are impacted, those families. Pray for our first responders and thank them, all of them working together, city, state, local, to make sure that we...
Okay, pretty standard mayoral kind of statement in the wake of a tragedy like this, right? This will have major impacts. It'll have impacts on transporting goods over this, incredibly high traffic bridge. It'll have an impact on people who use the bridge every day to come to work and to get home and all of that. So, it's a real deal. It's a serious thing. So what is the response? What is the quote tweet here? The person who's posting this. So here from I am yes, you are no, okay? And this is a big account. This isn't just some random, Twitter nobody who I just pulled up for no reason. I mean, this guy has like 5 times more followers than I do on Twitter. He said, this is Baltimore's DEI mayor, commenting on the collapsed Francis Scott Key Bridge. It's going to get so much worse. Prepare accordingly. So at this point, guys, DEI is basically just a substitute for a racial slur against black people, apparently. I don't know how else to interpret this. Baltimore's DEI mayor. This guy was elected with like 70% of the vote. And I don't even know anything personally about him. He could be atrocious. He could be some corporate sellout or whatever. I don't know his politics or his policies or whatever. But DEI mayor, I mean, at this point, it's like some of these conservatives just literally see a black person in a position of power or working, a regular job. And they'll just be like, you only got that job because you're a minority. This is a diversity hire. This is only because of the woke Marxists trying to infiltrate the West with diversity, equity, and inclusion programs or whatever. Couldn't possibly be the fact that this guy just won this election and he was elected to be the mayor of Baltimore. Maybe some people thought he was a good choice, and that's how this unfolded. No, it's DEI, as if what he didn't He doesn't deserve this position. This should be some old, stuffy, rich white guy in this position. What the fuck is the implication of this, guys? I mean, Jesus Christ. Another one here from Anthony Sabatini saying DEI did this. How? How did DEI do this? What are we doing? What kind of conversations are we having? This is the boogeyman that reactionaries have created for themselves, right? Is everything can only be explained not by like a material analysis of corruption and corporate greed and a lack of worker safety and all of that, or a lack of infrastructure investment, whatever. None of that. No material analysis. Everything can only be explained by these like conjured up, sensationalized, hyperbolic fixations on critical race theory and wokeness and diversity and equity and inclusion programs and ESG and whatever the fuck. They're just chasing ghosts in circles. They're boxing with nobody, okay? DEI did this. What does that mean? What does that mean? Is the bridge DEI? Was the bridge a diversity hire? Is that what we're saying? Were the engineers who designed the bridge, were they they were the result of DEI? Was it the construction workers who were the result of DEI? Was it the city council that didn't invest? Like, there's no logic to this whatsoever. It's just, I don't like the fact that, there are prominent minorities in society or something. I don't know how else to, give an analysis of this. We also have some pretty wild conspiracies that are going around on TikTok, on a bunch of different platforms, Twitter, obviously. I mean, this video of the timed detonations during the Key Bridge disaster is making the rounds on social media. So somebody pointed this out. Somebody actually showed me one of these videos earlier today. Apparently people are trying to say, because after this giant ship crashed into this huge steel bridge, and there were some sort of like sparks, it looks like, that were flying off as this giant metal contraption was ripping apart at the seams, that somehow that means this was what? Like a pre-planned, controlled demolition of the bridge? Was it a terrorist attack? That some other foreign entity came and put bombs on the bridge and then also coordinated with the ship to lose power and crash into one of the pillars of the bridge, and then they timed the explosives to go off right when the ship crashed into it? Like, what is happening? What is happening? I mean, these are not just some like random throwaway things, guys. This has been filling my timeline. That's the only reason I'm even talking about this crazy shit. I mean, even prominent people, right? Marjorie Taylor Greene, unfortunately from my home state of Georgia. There should be a serious investigation into the horrifying tragedy of the Francis Scott Key Bridge in Maryland. Okay, fair enough so far. Is this an intentional attack or an accident? So, I mean, that's not as crazy as some of the other ones that I've seen, but like, what evidence is there that this was an intentional attack? I mean, there's no evidence for that whatsoever. They're just kind of like having conversations with themselves here. Laura Logan, multiple intel sources. What are her sources? Who the fuck knows? But apparently these sources are saying the Baltimore bridge collapse was an absolutely brilliant strategic attack on U.S. critical infrastructure, most likely cyber, and our intelligence agencies know it. In information warfare terms, they just divided the U.S. along the Mason-Dixie line. And she goes on to say, exactly like in the Civil War. So this is a foreign cyber attack that was targeting U.S. critical infrastructure in order to cause a civil war. Okay. Andrew Tate, of course, had to chime in here. This ship was cyber attacked. What is the evidence for that? We don't know. We saw the power go off and on. I mean, that's it. It couldn't be a mechanical issue. Couldn't be anything else. No, it's a cyber attack. Lights go off, and it deliberately steers towards the bridge supports. Again, could it have just been a fuck-up that sometimes shit like this happens? We have train derailments that happen all the time. Do you assume that they got blown off the tracks by some, pre-planned explosive device, by an IED or something? Lights go off and it deliberately steers towards the bridge. Deliberately steers towards the bridge. As if what? The ship has some sort of agency here? Or it was being, I guess, remote controlled by somebody else. Foreign agents of the USA attack digital infrastructure. Nothing is safe. Black Swan imminent. Terrorist attack. Weird, the shit lost all the power as soon as it approached the bridge. I mean, yeah, it is kind of weird. Weird shit happens. That doesn't mean it was an attack. Maybe it comes out later. Maybe I'm totally wrong about this, and I'm going to be embarrassed for saying this. Maybe all of these typically deranged conservatives and reactionaries are all correct. This was actually a conspiracy by China and, the woke mob and the elitist cabal, and they were all trying to basically use their DEI tactics in order to steer a ship into a bridge. I don't know. You guys tell me what you think about this. One thing that may poke somewhat of a hole in that idea. So Maryland's governor just said that the ship's Mayday call, so they were calling Mayday on the ship as this was happening, enabled officials to limit traffic on Baltimore's Key Bridge before the crash that caused the collapse. Okay, so I mean, if they were issuing a Mayday call, it's a little bit challenging. It's a little bit of a stretch there, I'd say, that this was some sort of an intentional crash. Usually, if you're gonna do this kind of a thing, you would want the bridge to be as densely packed as possible. They were calling Mayday. Clearly, there was something going wrong with the ship. It crashed into the wrong part of the bridge at the wrong time. Maybe the bridge was fucked up. It wasn't well maintained. This or that, engineering failure. Who knows at the end of the day what it could be. I'm sure there's going to be an investigation. And it crashes into the bridge and it collapses. But I mean, thankfully, it seems like because of the ship's Mayday call, they were able to reduce the amount of people who were on the bridge at the time and potentially save people's lives. I mean, again, as far as I'm aware at this point, there's only been 6 people, well, I say only, but 6 people presumed dead. I say only because this is an incredibly popular bridge, okay? Thousands of people use this every single day, so it certainly could have been, a much higher casualty event, right? So we don't have the final count or anything. There could be some that we're unaware of right now, but obviously, I mean, it sucks. It's a tragedy, right? I mean, this is gonna fuck up people's lives. Again, people use this bridge all the time, and so it's gonna have an impact on people's lives for a long time now. And so I guess we'll have to stick with the investigation, whatever comes from that. I do think that the company itself, there needs to be a follow-up investigation, given the fact that the feds were looking in to the company that owned this ship for basically like mistreatment of workers and not allowing their workers to effectively report potential safety concerns. So I think that definitely needs to be investigated. But in terms of whether or not this was like some sort of a woke DEI Chinese Russian collaboration to destroy the West or something like that, I don't see any evidence for that right now. So I guess I'll just leave it there.